If you start to cry, look up to the sky. Something's coming up ahead to turn your tears to dew instead. And so I hold on to this advice. When change is hard and not so nice, if you listen to your heart the whole night through, your sunny someday will come one day soon too.
Un pas, une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, c'est un éclat de verre, c'est la vie, le soleil, c'est la mort, le sommet. C'est un piège entrouvert, un arbre millénaire, un nœud dans le bois. C'est un chien qui aboie, c'est un oiseau dans l'air, c'est un tronc qui pourrit, c'est la neige qui fond. Le mystère profond, la promesse de vie, c'est le souffle du vent au sommet des collines. C'est une vieille ruine, le vide, le néant. C'est la pie qui jacasse, c'est l'averse qui verse des torrents d'allégresse. Ce sont les eaux de Mars, c'est le pied qui avance à pas sûr, à pas lent. C'est la main qui se tend, c'est la pierre qu'on lance. C'est un trou dans la terre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, c'est un oiseau dans l'air, un oiseau qui se pose, le jardin qu'on arrose, une source d'eau claire, une écharde, un clou. C'est la fièvre qui monte, c'est un compte à bon compte, c'est un peu rien du tout. Un poisson à un geste, c'est comme du fifarchon. C'est tout ce qu'on attend, c'est tout ce qui nous reste. C'est du bois, c'est un jour, le bout du quai, un alcool trafiqué, le chemin le plus court. C'est les cris d'un hibou, encore ensommeillé, la voiture rouillée, c'est la bouche, c'est la boue. Un pas, un pont, un crapaud qui croasse, c'est un chaland qui passe, c'est un bel horizon. C'est la saison des pluies, c'est la fonte des glaces. Ce sont les eaux de Mars, la promesse de vie. Pierre, un bateau, c'est Joseph et c'est Jacques. Un sapin qui attaque, une entaille au talon. Un pas, une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, un point, une bosse, une tâche, un goût, un geste, une aiguille, une guêpe, un coup. L'hiver qui s'efface, fin d'une saison. C'est la neige qui fond, ce sont les eaux de Mars. La promesse de vie, le mystère profond. Ce sont les eaux de Mars, dans ton cœur tu te fonds. Un pas, une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un reste de racines. C'est un peu solitaire, c'est l'hiver qui s'efface, la fin d'une saison.
Hello?
La neige qui fond, ce sont les eaux de Mars. La promesse de vie, le mystère profond. Ce sont les eaux de Mars, dans ton cœur tu te fonds.
morning, everyone. Okay, wow, we have a lot of participants coming in. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea from Endeavor Philippines. Welcome to EndeavHER, entering the fundraising game. So, this event features an all-women panel from the Endeavor APAC network. So, learn about the do's and don'ts and challenges both from the perspective of investors and entrepreneurs. This event is brought to you by the Endeavor APAC network, which includes Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam. So, welcome everyone. And now, allow me to call our moderator for the panel today, Ryoko Manabe, who is the Endeavor Japan Managing Director. So, Ryoko, go ahead, introduce yourself and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryoko Manabe. That as TLC-san introduced, that I'm managing director of the Endeavor Japan. By the way, I have a very strong Japanese accent. So if you have any question about my what I said, please use the chat box. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I'm so excited because we have because of thanks to that Endeavor network, and then also thanks to that staff's effort, we have amazing panels today. So that I don't know, but so we actually already have many questions from the audience, but we actually secure a time for the question from audience. So if you have any question, you can just use the chat box to ask the question or pick the question from there. So before kick off the session, let me introduce Endeavor and then also about EndeavHER. I still cannot pronounce EndeavHER, but still. So as you all know that Endeavor is a mission-driven global organization that did the high-impact entrepreneurship movement. Endeavor was established in 1997, and we believe that economic growth and innovation flourish where there is robust support for entrepreneurs. And also this Endeavor program, EndeavHER program is that help female entrepreneurs accelerate growth of their business, and inspire. We hope that that we can inspire the next wave of female entrepreneurship around the world. Unfortunately, I think the situation is different in each region, but sadly, this is still true that entrepreneurship thing is still dominated by male entrepreneur. And I don't think we can be the only solution, but we hope that we can change this status quo little by bit. That's why we created this session. So as Chelsea mentioned, this is actually the our second EndeavHER event organized by APAC office. We'll have more session later on this year. So please stay tuned, and we'll share the information later. So this is a 90-minute session. So it's gonna end 11:30 in Japan, and then also 10:30 in Philippines, and Singapore and Malaysia, and 9:30 in Indonesia and Vietnam. So enough for the explanation, but let's begin the session. We would like to start from introduction of today's panelists. We have amazing panelists today. So please introduce yourself. Sarah-san, could you start off?
Sorry, did you call on me?
Yes, sorry, I have a very strong Japanese accent, and also I tend to call somebody's name with san because it's Mr. or Mrs. in Japanese. So
Yes, I remember. Hi, happy to get us started here, and thanks so much for having me. My name is Sarah Chen. So I love how Endeavor had put the description there on geography, but I am Malaysian, born and true, but living now in the United States, and my work really spans globally. So I have had the tremendous pleasure of working with Jackie and the rest of the group across Endeavor, and we are beyond the billion. I represent a global consortium of over 100 venture funds and limited partner investors into those funds that are investing across the globe, across stages, from across verticals, agtech, cleantech, fintech, health tech, you name it, that have pledged and are actively deploying over $1 billion, hence the name Beyond the Billion, to female founded companies. And excited to be here and to unpack it all with you.
Thank you. So next, Chelsea-san, please. Not Chelsea-san, sorry, Rosaline-san, please.
Hi, my name is Rosaline Koo. I'm the founder and CEO of CXA Group. This is actually my third startup. I had two during the .com 20 years ago. So 20 years later, I am still here. But I've raised 58 million US over 3 rounds, and whatever I can do to help other female founders, let's pave the way.
Thank you. So Jackie-san, please.
Sure, thanks, Ryoko. My name is Jackie Carmel. I am Managing Director of Endeavor Catalyst. I've been with the organization for 7 years now, and I focus primarily on fundraising and investor relations, and I'm honored to be here with all of you today. And I'm based in San Francisco.
Thank you. So Sarah-san is based in Washington and Jackie is from San Francisco. We have everyone from all over the world. So it's my turn. So this is Yoko. I'm managing director of the Endeavor Japan. I started my career as a strategic consultant, but I also have a background in big corporation, and also I was in a startup. I'm kind of surprised that Rosaline is like in the scene for 20 years, but I didn't know. How old are you, by the way? But anyway, so that, I was in the, what? What? Maybe, and at the end, maybe you can ask how those things keep, being so young. But, I was in a startup to a very early stage. And then, that time, when I was in a startup, there was not, many VC in Japan. So that, raising fund from VC was not, the things. But, now that, in Asia or the, I mean, not just Japan or Singapore, in the Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, I think there are so many ways to raise the fund. So that, I'm excited about, listening all about, fundraising in Asia today. So, so I will start with, a couple of questions. And then also there's, many questions, already sent by the audience today. So we'll actually follow up, with that. But also that, since so many people are joining today, I wanted to, take the question from the audience today too. So let me start with the, first question. So, just, as I mentioned, now that, there are so many ways to secure the capital, and then what is, pros and cons of raising fund from VC or CVC, and what's what's going to be the main challenges around that? Maybe Sarah-san, could you start? So that's I will gonna point out.
Sure. Happy to do that. I think this is a very important question, Ryoko-san. I think, for businesses, considering who your business partner is, investment, and I think Jackie Carmel can speak to this, it is an investment in your business for the long run, right? It is, it might even be longer than a marriage. I mean, I hear some people who've been in their businesses. I mean, think about Amazon, right? We think that it's a business that popped up recently, but actually, no, they've been around for close to 3 decades now. And, the investor makes or breaks the direction of the business. So you really want to think very hard about who you want to invite into that sacred space that you're building. So, I think there's many different ways to think about it. It depends on what stage you are. And I'm sure we can unpack that a little bit. But what is the number one thing that you're looking for? Are you at a stage where you're looking for scale and therefore you're looking for capital, or is it beyond capital where there's a strategic partner that can help you open the doors to markets that you would not typically get into, or will make that a little bit easier? What is it that you're really looking for? So I think there are multiple ways. We're here because we're all passionate about women getting funded, and unfortunately, the good news, bad news is women are underfunded, but they've been very, very resourceful in finding different modes. So whilst they've not necessarily succeeded tremendously with venture capital, and we're here to change that, they've also looked at different routes, from even, bank loans to crowdsourcing from friends and family to, different modes without going typically to the institutional route. And some of them have, there's even different models nowadays, like revenue-based financing, and there are many different views on that. Is that something that's suitable for your business? But, it's hard to say, this is the one route for you without understanding where you are in your business and what your priorities are. But I would say, really, really knowing your business inside out, where you are in the business and what does this partner bring to the table. So as much as, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a power dynamic where it feels like, because you need the capital you think you need the capital at that moment to scale, you feel you're at the losing end. But think about it in the longer term. An investor is investing in you because like it or not, it is about financial return. Sure, they can, there'll be only so much friends and family that believe in you because they just want to believe in you. But if you're looking to a venture capital fund, I mean, Jackie is pressured for returns from her limited partner investors, right? So, what does that take? And, I really challenge a lot of you who are tuning in today to really think hard about what's necessary for you at this point in time to get you to the next stage, and really understanding that to think about, which is a pro and con that fits for your model.
Thank you. So Jackie-san, could you add a comment or that,
Sure. I'm happy to jump in. And Sarah, I echo everything that you shared. At Endeavor, we really do believe that fundraising is all about partnership. So if you're going to raise equity capital and essentially trade away or give away part of your business, usually anywhere from 15 to 20%, it really should be worth it. And what we mean by that is that you should be getting something other than just capital in return. At the end of the day, the cash is really a commodity at this point. So, you want a real partner, someone who will add value, and you can get that in traditional venture capital. So as Sarah mentioned, there are other ways, especially that women have found, to raise capital. But when you go the route of, say, crowdsourcing, for example, you're losing out on the opportunity to really find that real partner who can add, strategic value. So again, focus on this long-term partnership, as Sarah said. Make sure that you're getting something in return for the business that you're, trading away, other than just cash or in addition to cash. And then I think the other part of the question was with regards to corporate venture capital and kind of the pros and cons there. And what we found at Endeavor is that corporate venture capital firms can be really good partners, specifically for companies at later stages. So usually when you have your strategy figured out, because typically corporate venture capital firms have more than one objective. It's typically strategic, in addition to financial. And so bringing them on too early might kind of hinder the business from doing a necessary pivot if that partner is in place early. So kind of another way that we like to think about corporates is that they can engage with you and your business in a number of different ways. There's a hierarchy. So they can be a client, they can be a partner, they can be an investor, eventually they can be a buyer. And so we like to encourage our founders to think about corporates initially as potentially a client and a partner, and then maybe eventually as an investor, and maybe ultimately a buyer.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, this is kind of like, good point that, many Japanese entrepreneurs make a mistake because, if the company approached you and then like if they said they wanted to give you the money, the, entrepreneur will be so happy and jump into that in money. But, if it's from the corporate, there is always that reason that why they wanted to invest to you. So that as Jackie, mentioned that, like starting from that, partnership or, as a client, the relation, having a relation, with a corporate as a, client is actually important, I think. Thank you. So Rosaline-san, please share your thought.
Yeah, so I have about 20 investors now. So I've lived every variation. I seeded my own company with all my savings. And then I found my husband's keys and found his savings too. He does not believe he has a return on his money. In my seed round, I had VCs. And in my B round, I had VCs. But in my third round, that's when I took corporate venture money, mainly because I wanted them to be my clients, because we had the model and I needed their client base to scale. So I've done about 4 projects for corporate VCs where we are their platform and we power their platform. It's become a SaaS model, but there's pros and cons, right? The VCs don't always know your business models as well, but at least they're financially focused. The corporate venture capital is very focused on their own strategic needs, not your needs, their needs. And sometimes they're so huge that in any project, they can have 20 project manager versus your one, right? So they're just managing your startup. They feel like they own you, but they can help you grow. So I've had good experience with some corporate VCs. I've had some very bad experiences with corporate VCs because some don't know how to deal with startups. So there are pros and cons to all of this. But when you're raising money, mostly you're concerned about having capital. Only 3% of us even get any capital. So sometimes we take what money we can get and we live with our consequences. And so, look, I have every variation of funding, right? And staying alive. So from an entrepreneur's perspective, right, we just try to manage what we can. But some corporate VCs can overwhelm your life by demanding all your time and resources. So yes, plus and minuses, you grow, but they just kind of kill you in the process.
Yeah, real quick, if I may add to Rosaline, I think, I was part of a corporate VC back in Malaysia years ago. And so I empathize and I definitely appreciate the different views. And it's true, right? I think I saw how a startup was bamboozled with a lot of questions because we as a corporate are still tied to certain requirements from a governance standpoint. We may not know how to invest and move as quickly, right? Because you're in a big corporate, there are certain structures, and there's a reason why there's images of how a startup and the corporate is often like a dinosaur and a little bit of a modern creature working together. And it's about finding that fit. And to your point, Rosaline, I think you've had so much experience with different characters. And it's also, I think what's important is not to put a blanket rule on, okay, this is how all CVCs are. But what you should do as an entrepreneur is, as much as they're doing due diligence on you, you need to do due diligence on the investor. So ask your friends, ask around before, you even considering taking that check. Right. So every CVC, I have to say, there are certain similarities if they're investing from, again, you want to think about, are they investing? Is it a separate entity? Do they have the independence? Or was it like where I had to struggle with, we were investing from the balance sheet. So I still had to go to the CFO and get the sign off and things like that. So, what does that mean for a startup? It means that I slow down the decision making, and that decision could cost, as Rosaline is saying, right? You're fighting to survive, and you can't have an investor at a certain stage of your life slowing you down. So yes. To Jackie's point as well, there could be certain benefits in thinking about a strategic partner later on once you're a little bit stronger. But again, hard to put a blanket rule on everything. But the number one thing, if there's one thing I would urge you all to take away, is to do your homework and really ask around and ask previous startups that they've invested in, how do you treat a board decision? Are you going to have an observer or a board member? What does this mean? And how much, to Jackie's point, how much are you giving away, right? What's the trade-off here for that little bit of capital gain or a lot of capital gain?
Thank you. So, I think, Sarah-san, you actually, experience with, as a CVC person, and then, Rosaline-san, you actually, experience as, as an investee, but invested. But do you have any tips that, to check who is right, who is your right investor, or, is there any way to kind of how can I say, how to deal with CVC person, because CVC person actually have own agenda. So how you can actually talk with the CVC person, with different agenda. Is there any I don't know.
To me, Sarah's right. You've got to check with other startups on the reputation of this corporate venture, right? Sometimes they want to take your tech and they become a competitor. so I mean, you just don't know. So, I mean, look, I learned after the fact, right? We take all this money, then you talk to all the other entrepreneurs, and they've had exactly the same experience that you have. And we all get crushed, right? Because we're the little guy, right? We're the little guy, we're under-resourced, we're just hustling to stay alive. So yeah, the best advice is to talk to your peers and all the other startups. No matter how you talk to the corporate VC, you are the underdog.
I'll add that And even though you are the underdog, to all of these points, at the end of the day, this is a relationship, taking capital. It's almost like a marriage. You're going to be in this relationship for many, many years and go through many ups and downs. And so it's really two-sided, as much as the investor is doing their diligence on you, as Rosaline said, it's so important to do your diligence on them. At the end of the day, it takes two. And, you might feel like you're not in the position of power, as Sarah mentioned, but at the end of the day, you have something that investors want. And don't forget that. And so doing your diligence, speaking to other founders and just making sure that you're making the right decision for you, as much as you might feel that you're desperate for money at the time, know that this is a long-term decision for you and your business.
Thank you. So maybe some of the the audience today might be that from CBC. So Sarah-san, what's actually that the thing that CBC people can actually change the act so that startup can actually work with the startup at the CBC more efficiently, or
Oh, I have so many suggestions. I think there's a lot. Yeah, I have huge respect for investors. Let's not discount that the role of investors here is important, but I think the journey of working with a startup, it's not easy, right? Innovation. I think a lot of corporates are realizing that they're being disrupted, right? Companies like Rosaline's company is disrupting the insurtech business. And it's either you play the game or you're out. And this is a real threat. So, as much as they are trying to innovate within, there is also real fear coupled with that. And there's, a struggle between legacy systems, which are real, right? There are structures in place which have been there and have worked for years. And especially in Asia, where there is still, a lot of respect for bureaucracy and hierarchy, there is some element of change that needs to happen, and it doesn't happen immediately, but I think we're starting to see that, and the successes of a lot of startups in the recent years in Southeast Asia, in Asia across, is making that a lot more real. So I think number one would be what I've learned myself is, I started in this journey when I was a young 26-year-old talking to a 60-year-old, 50-year-old CFO negotiating on a 30 million deal. And what I learned the most was to listen first and foremost, because, I was young, so I had a lot to learn, and I listened to what the needs of every stakeholder was. And that taught me a lot as an executive within the team. And I knew what the fears, talking about the struggle within, right? This is real. It's not like they're trying to destroy the startup. No, of course not. It's about how do we create value together. Hopefully, of course, there's certain situations like Rosaline pointed to where, it is a strategy to remove the competitor and then acquire and then copy and so on and so forth. Those things happen. You need to take the risk. You need to think about that. You need to be smart about it. But if you're within the CVC, I would say listen to all the stakeholders and try to come to a middle point, right? I found a lot of my time, frankly, was spent managing stakeholders more than what I thought I was supposed to be doing, which was writing the checks and helping to do the diligence. But it really is a culture shift, if you think about it, right? Corporates trying to invest into startups and change the way from within and change with the industry. I think that's a huge leap. So, I would say number one, listen. What are the fears? What's the worst that can happen? And really map it out so that, both sides of the table can come to a good ground of really what the objective was in the first place of investing in the startup, right? Which is to hopefully learn also from the startup and change and innovate and move a little bit more quickly with the times and potentially add value to their startup and the business and create, joint value there together. So putting the mission ahead of the politics, I think is so important, and it's hard. It's really hard. But, never lose sight of that and the job that you have to do, which is to get to the best outcome for both.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel I listen more and more, and then I really think that this is like marriage, that two different people and the different people actually, try to live together. So it's the difficult, things, from
and the husband and wife grew up in different ways, right? So the husband grew up in a way that's like, okay, let's go now, let's go. Whereas the wife may be like, okay, calm down, So it's about mergers of two cultures and coming to the best outcome.
Thank you. And also, like, I think it's still now that, that we are testing what's the right case, so that, I think CBC or the, even like BC need to learn, from the startup too. So, maybe in the future, then especially like in Asia, we are, testing new case, and, hopefully that, maybe we can create, a couple like, success case. But, can we actually really, go back to the, the question and the, do you talk about, there's pros and cons and invested by the VC, but, what's actually the right timing to invest it by the VC? Is it like, of course, it's going to be, different in each industry, but, Rosaline-san, you mentioned that you actually invested, your money, and also like you got the money from the husband. So like, when was the good timing you decided, oh, okay, it's that, time to actually get, the money from outside? Like, could you share that,
So for me, it was very personal. My husband took away my password to the ATM and the bank account and removed my name. And he said, go, you've spent all our money. You go and find outside money. He also kicked me out of the house. We had 10 people working in our living room. And he said, that's it, a year. I cannot take it anymore. So he said, you need to get institutional money, right? And so I'm not sure this happens to everybody else. But, look, I invested my own money because I used to run this multinational, all 14 countries. And I asked for 10 million from, because I was the Asia Pac head. I asked for 10 million to invest in Asia, to invest in tech, because it makes no sense that there's paper everywhere in the insurance industry. And they said no. So I said, I am going to spend 10 million, right? So unfortunately, 5 came from me and my husband and 5 from a bank loan. And we only started raising outside money, when we needed to, and also when I got kicked out, right? So, but that's how I knew, right? Because doors shut. But it's we actually had traction before we went outside for money. So we actually won quite a few clients and proven the model first. Because it's useless going to ask for venture money if you have no traction or business model. So that's when we decided it was the right time.
I would say that if you have traction and a business model, you're kind of further in a position of power to raise money, and you can likely negotiate better terms. I will say more and more people are raising money without traction, with some sort of a business plan. And that's kind of a deeply personal decision as well, right? You're going to end up giving away more of your business at that point. But if you need the capital to scale, it might be necessary. It might be worth it. Again, it goes to this idea of, is what you're giving away worth it? That we, at Endeavor Catalyst, like to think about this principle of good dilution. On average, companies that become unicorns have raised, 5 rounds of venture capital. And each time you're giving away, 15 to 20% of your business. And so you need to be looking at this, at the end of the day. And even though becoming a unicorn now is just kind of a step along the journey, but you want to end up owning, at least 20% of your business at that point. And so what does that look like every step of the way? And kind of what we like to tell our entrepreneurs is, don't over gamify any one round. Just kind of stay true and think about this principle of good dilution, who you're bringing on, how much capital you're taking on, how much of your business you're giving away, every step of the journey. Just make sure that trade-off is kind of worth it.
Thank you. Shira-san, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in terms of when to raise, it's a very personal decision, as Rosaline has really pointed out. And, actually we laugh about it, but, this is real life, right? And guys and gals tuning in, this is entrepreneurship. It is hard. It is, I have a podcast now where I interview some of the top performers, and, a lot of them say that entrepreneurship is what you do if you cannot imagine yourself doing anything else, because it's so hard. And you're willing to do things like that, where you have 10 people in your house and your husband is mad at you. And I can only imagine that personal situation, because I've been through it, right? Where it's like really uncomfortable personally, but you care so much about you're so obsessed with solving this problem. And that's the entrepreneurial gene that you just have. So, you know, I think in terms of when to raise, if you have runway, right? If you have runway to manage in a very bootstrap manner, the longest, the possible, maybe it's a good thing depending on where you are, because then to Jackie's point, you're avoiding the dilution before you know what it is, right? So don't give up too much before you know your product market fit, how it can scale, where your hockey stick, you know, we talk about the growth chart, where do you stand? If this is your first time, you want to test it out before you really give away too much, right? And I've seen entrepreneurs give up their IP because they were not savvy enough, because they thought, okay, I want to tell this VC everything because this is my ticket. But really, you know, depending on what business you're in, you're going to need probably a little bit more. And one ticket is not enough. You want to make sure that you're protecting yourself enough so that you're also attractive to others, right? So remember, like Rosaline said, she has 20 investors. If you're giving away your exclusivity and all these things to one investor, the first one that so happened to be meeting you at a very desperate point, you know, what are the trade-offs here? So, you know, I would say be smart about where you think you're going. You know, some traction, and I saw a question on traction, is very hard to say. You know, if you look at some of the accelerators, and there was a question on accelerators, they talk about, you know, 1 million traction, 1.5. But again, you know, there are pre-seed investors these days, because it's, I feel, to Jackie's point, it is, capital is a commodity now. Everyone's looking for great ideas, and they're willing to take the risk if they feel that you've got something. So, you know, be smart about it. I think about what the long-term trajectory is, but be very realistic with yourself. So, you know, hopefully you're doing this when you've thought about, like Rosaline, I think she was very smart, right? She learned the inner workings. She got her contacts. She built herself to, you know, not many of us can say I have $5 million that I can go and grab straight away to get started. Right, that is a privilege, but she took a path different way, and some of us are starting a little bit younger where we don't have that, and that's okay. So you figure it out. But you know, I feel we're not answering the questions, but it's very specific, you know. So it's hard to say like, okay, everyone do this, and I think that would be a misaligned way to respond to this as well.
True. Thank you. And also, like, you know, your comment actually reminded me that, you know, it's actually happened with the, you know, with some of the, you know, entrepreneur, not our entrepreneur, but, you know, entrepreneur in Japan and with CVC, that, you know, CVC sometimes gave that, you know, very high evaluation, valuation, so that, you know, the entrepreneur was so excited at first, but, you know, later on the, you know, stage, that actually made them in a bad, you know, place, because evaluation was too high. And then they couldn't keep up the, you know, the sales. So that, you know, I think, you know, be smart with, like, when you're fundraising, not just one time, but, you know, thinking that, you know, how many times you need to raise, and then, you know, you need to actually be sure that, you know, about, you know, the valuation of your company too. Like, thank you. So that, you know, maybe can you move to the next question? So that, you know, when you actually invested, you know, by the investor, you know, what the actually investor is looking for? Can you give us, you know, the practical tips, do and don'ts, in, you know, based on their experience? Maybe Sarah-san, could you start with us?
I feel like this is set up for Jackie. Okay. I'm going to call on Jackie.
Okay.
Jackie, I'll tag you for this.
I'm happy to jump in. I think in the most kind of simplistic way, you know, investors are looking for a great team solving a real problem in a big market, kind of full stop. And if you can deliver that, you'll have, you know, capital knocking down your door, and you'll have your pick. Obviously, that's a tall order, and it's hard to prove, and it takes a lot of work to get there. You know, as Sarah mentioned, as Rosaline can attest, you know, entrepreneurship it's a battlefield. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, it is a really tough career path. I'm married to an entrepreneur. I do not envy it. You know, it is tough, but you're born that way, you know, and so entrepreneurs, it's a calling, I think. So anyway, great team, real problem, big market. And then in terms of do's and don'ts, you know, again, it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. This is a partnership. Do your diligence. As much as they're doing their diligence on you, do your diligence on the investor, and don't have a shotgun wedding.
Thank you. I think in the States, I think entrepreneurs talk each other, and then if you do the bad thing, that the VC actually will be like evaluated by the entrepreneur. So the sharing of information or listening to others is actually very important too. But unfortunately, maybe in Japan or some of the Asian country that Japan we don't have kind of like talking culture yet, and also like in some of the country that we don't have many VC, so that evaluating the VC might be a little bit difficult. So like, do you have any suggestion, like, joining Endeavor is actually the key, solution for this, but still, if you don't have, network like Endeavor, like how, do you collect the information? Like, do you have any idea on that?
Sure. So I think, yes, of course, to plug Endeavor, I think joining Endeavor is a great idea, or an organization like Endeavor, where you can openly speak to other founders about their experiences across a wide range of topics, including taking venture capital from a specific investor, if that may be the case. So I think there's definitely a role for these types of organizations and networks, because at the end of the day, only another entrepreneur is truly going to know kind of what you're going through and share in your struggles and also in your achievements. Rosaline could probably speak to that further.
Yes, the sadness of entrepreneurship versus the assumed glamour, which is really not there.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I think having a network is so important. I just recently discovered Endeavor, and the network's amazing, right? It's founders and mentors, and advisors. So these networks are really important.
Yeah, and just to answer that question as well, Rosaline, I would say in countries where there's not a lot of information and networks, right, as how you should do let's think about it as dating, right? Again, going back to that metaphor, you want to have a couple of tests before you decide. And that's as simple as, how long does it take for an NDA to come over? What are they insisting on? What sort of questions are they asking? Do they really know your business, or are they, is this a fishing expedition? Those little things, I mean, sometimes we think it's not important, but I've learned like some of these little, if I've made if I look at the partnerships, I've done so many partnerships to this day now. When I look back at some of my decisions, I probably already knew it was not a good deal, but I went against my gut instinct, and this is something. But also there are a lot of signs that you can tell, like how long does it take for someone, to respond to something that is important to you and you thought is a priority. If this person doesn't respond in a timely manner, what does this say? Right. Yeah. I'm not saying, working to death, right? I'm not saying you need to have a workaholic type environment, but if something is a priority to you and is not being treated as a priority to the other person, that tells you something. So look at these little tests, right? In venture capital, in accepting investment, and in bringing on a strategic partner, this is all a partnership, and you want to feel like you are in this mission together. And sometimes I've seen the worst things that actually happen, talking about, there's a question on sole founder or whether there's a barrier to fundraise. Some of the biggest challenges are actually in managing relationships, whether that's in the business, whether that's with other parties outside the business. And it's not necessarily about just getting funding. People think that getting funding is the biggest hurdle. I actually think it's team management. I actually think it's bringing out the best in your team and scaling in that, because we've seen some of that, right? I'm reading, I've just finished Hashing Twitter. If those of you who are interested in the journey of Twitter and didn't know, that's a really good book. Just how the founders fought about every single thing. Jack Dorsey was taking interviews when he was not supposed to be, and he's not actually on the team. Things like this happen. It's real life. So yeah, present opportunities that would be tests that you can take away from, is what I would say.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, like, yeah, the team is really important, that especially with like an Endeavor, I noticed that, like going through the Endeavor process, that, like creating 0 to 1, maybe you can do it, with one person, but, creating the scale up company is that, something you cannot do with, one person. So that, like the first time I heard that, the investor is looking for the team, I was like, but, I really now understand why team is so important, because, even if you're a super person, yeah, that, there's some, so many, there are not many things you can do, so that, I think creating teams, very important. And yeah, Thank you. Also that, there's actually a, you mentioned that, test, VC or the CBC is actually important. And, what do you think about, like negotiating with the term sheet or the also, contract? I'm asking because, many Japanese, entrepreneur kind of feel like, awkward to negotiate with the, term sheet. But is that something you really need to do, right? What do you have any opinion about that? Or that, I think this is, maybe one of the good test case that you can, negotiate, with the term sheet or not, maybe tell you that, this BC or the CBC might be good fit to, to you or not. What do you think? Rosaline-san, could you share your thought?
So how you negotiate the term sheet tells you a lot about the investors, right? Because in a normal life of an entrepreneur, you're going to run into so many ups and downs because it's a complete roller coaster. So how you, in those dealings, like Sarah said, tells you a lot, right? The response, the flexibility, the understanding of the low points as well as the highs, right? So it's part of the dating game. I mean, if they're rigid and non-negotiable and unresponsive, don't expect any change once you get married, right? So
In fact, it gets
dating
worse.
is- exactly,
Yes.
because now the deal is done. So you only have negotiating power before you get married, right? But it's a sign of things to come. It really is. So the dating is really important. And dating many people is important too. So just so
That's
you
so
know,
true.
and you have a perspective of what is life like and what are the choices. So yeah,
and
I think negotiating is important because if you're just going to be a rug and you take it lying down, imagine how they're going to treat you and walk all over you. So yeah, you want to find out as much as possible during the dating process because that relationship is key. It's just like the relationship with your team, and leadership. The relationship with your shareholders can ruin you. The relationship with your teams can ruin you. So a leader's biggest job is managing all your stakeholders, your investors, your employees, your clients.
Thank you. Yes. So, I have tons of questions, but, we really have like the 40 minutes to go. And can I actually ask, about the, main question I wanted to ask today? So, I think, it's true in Japan, but, I think it's true any, in other place too. But, is it true that, it's harder to raise fund, as a female entrepreneur? And, if it's yes, did you experience that, similar experience firsthand? And, if you have, any, thought about, like what do you think, the solution to, solve this situation? I think, Sarah-san is already try to solve, this problem, but
yeah, I feel like Rosaline, maybe you can talk about your specific experience, then I can give a little bit of flavor from a global, like what we're observing, whether she experienced it.
So when I first started pitching, one of the principals of the Kauffman Foundation told me that I need to pitch better, right? And he said, he told me something that I always remember. And he said, look, when men pitch, we divide by 10. When women pitch, we multiply by 10. And so when I initially pitched, I really underestimated because I was just trying to be like rational and truthful and, this is what I think we can do. So ever since then, I pitch like men. And I don't think of myself as like a female pitcher. I'm just trying to pitch against every other insurtech, health tech. But he told me that. And so, look, I know I underestimated when I first started pitching.
Yeah. So, this is, I always love hearing the individual experiences because it's a lot of times the female founder and, I don't even want to put Rosaline as a female founder, although this is important, the goal and even my personal mission with the work that we do is to mainstream it, right? So that we're at a stage. And the reason why we're doing EndeavHER is because the reality is it's only 3% of venture capital that's going to female founders, all female founded teams, 10 to 12% with teams with at least one female founder. And in Asia, different parts of the world, of course, that's, that varies, but it's still at that very abysmal level. So there is a necessity at this point. And it's so interesting when I hear each female founder sometimes gaslight her own self in that, oh, I don't actually know, but this is clearly a case of pitch like a man, right? You're being judged differently. And that's not on it. And, if you take this at an aggregate level, this is where we see the numbers that we see, because this is unconscious bias. In venture, in the investment industry, we talk about pattern recognition. But pattern recognition, I always say, can be a mask for unconscious bias, right? When you're talking about you don't pitch good enough, what does that really mean? It means that the investor has been so used to presentations by a certain individual that is, loud and gregarious and therefore, aggressive, but in a very good way, that this person is brilliant and visionary. But of course, and I think that's a bit of a difficult tightrope for us to navigate in Asia, because in Asia, particularly growing up in Malaysia, Muslim majority country where I'm the minority, I felt this, right? Being seen to have an opinion. Things are changing now, but it's not always a good thing, right? You were socialized in a different way. So then, even though people, investors tell founders like Rosaline, go pitch better, sometimes this can also have a detrimental effect because, hey, I didn't expect that from you. Are you too aggressive now? She doesn't fit a mold, So it's a bit of a difficult, rope to navigate. And I think what we need to do is a few things. Number one is to address how we're actually socializing young girls and women. It starts from a very young age, right? I use the sandbox example. Some of us who have a boy and a girl in the family, are we telling our boys to, get rough and play in the sandbox and experiment, and telling our girls to be very careful, don't dirty your dress? Because, we talk about entrepreneurship and it's hard and it's the hustle. If you're telling your girl from a very young age to be super careful and not dirty her dress, what do you think will happen years later, right? As she grows into adulthood, hopefully, she sees more role models. But again, that's another thing we don't see. I think we talked about it earlier behind the scenes. Rosaline was saying, oh, are we just talking? Maybe I shouldn't talk about InsurTech. That's like no woman except for myself in this, right? And this is the case, that we don't have enough role models, and we become what we aspire to be, what we can see. And I think, with EndeavHER, this is why I'm so supportive of the work you do, because it's about creating those examples that, hey, I can be true to myself. I don't have to be a certain way. And this is also leadership style. I think some of the best leaders are actually introverts, and this is proven, right? Some of them are really weird. Let's look at Elon Musk. But, that doesn't mean well, we all have different views on Elon Musk, but, this guy is sending a rocket to the moon, right? Put it that way. So, I think there's a need for diversity. And this is why I believe in diversity so much, because we need to see different examples of ourselves, different versions of leaders that can succeed. And it's not just a single way. So, I'll start there, but, it starts with asking, even being very careful from an investor standpoint about your own biases, right? Real Ventures, one of our partner funds in Canada, published an article today about how they make sure they ask the female founder and the male founder the exact same questions, because the truth is, female founders, research has shown that female founders are judged by higher standards, right? Because of everything we talked about how they're socialized, how then, okay, if they're too aggressive, suddenly, wait, I'm shocked. How do I handle this? Maybe she has something to hide. I'm skeptical of her. So all these things are things that we need to start being very mindful of, and designing to include diversity, and being very mindful about that, and being sure that, things like even a job description, right? We talk about, Jackie and I are working together at Beyond the Billion to address also the next level, which is the limited partner investors investing to venture funds. Are you asking questions of your venture funds, like track record, that first of all, many women are not in the investment industry, and then you're asking them for like a 10-year track record. They can never spin out in the way that you want, because it's like getting I always make the comparison of asking an intern for all the job experience before you give an internship. So, there's a lot of these things that we need to think about, the real barriers, the real biases. And it starts with really being very aware and addressing and designing for diversity.
Thank you. And yeah, that, I think, Yeah, like, so many, the things going on, and like, I think, the Sarah-san's point is like, so important, I think creating the, the, even like one example, a couple examples is important because, the VC is usually like follow that, success model, right? So that, we need to actually create, one or, two success models so that the people can follow. So that, Sarah-san, actually, you created the funds for the female, the women, right? So that I think those, activities like, if we're gonna, if it's increased that, maybe we can actually, I don't know, we can actually solve that, those problems. And also like, I heard that, since there, because there are so few female, investor, the femtech is behind because, no men can actually understand what the problem is. So that, there's like less investment in the femtech. So that I think that, if we have enough more, investor, more the female investor, maybe we can actually, there'll be more like, the area, new area, maybe we can create together. That's kind of what I thought, but, maybe insurtech too, that, some of the insurance is like, very like male dominant, like, thinking, but, maybe if we can create, the insurance, like, from the, female, perspective, I think it's going to be like, I think this is the way to actually create a, new business and then also like, maybe like a new industry too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I may add, like in the meantime, people like Rosaline, it's a huge arbitrage opportunity, right? I mean, AXA had declared that they want to be the insurer for women because it's a huge opportunity. I mean, you're talking about, our increasing purchasing power. You talk about the lifespan of a woman and the inheritance in the next few years, right? As millennials and baby boomer wives that will continue to inherit and the greatest wealth transition that's going to happen by 2030. So I think that's a huge market shift. A lot of brands are realizing it now. Even brands are starting to be more ESG focused because they know that this is a trend. 40% of capital will be ESG focused in the next 5 years. So, I think while, some investors might be comfortable with the old way of not looking to diversity, many others like this on this call here will look at it as a great arbitrage opportunity and benefit from it. So, it's either you're in or you're out.
True. Thank you. So can we move to that, some of the questions that asked by the audience in advance. So, okay, so how can an entrepreneur choose the right networking in order to create a big impact? What should be the criteria to be? It's from the Gloria from Indonesia. So maybe Jackie-san, could you start?
Sure. Could you repeat the question?
Sorry. How can entrepreneur choose the right network in order to create a big impact?
Sure. So I think it goes back, to what we were saying earlier. I can speak from the Endeavor lens. I think just having a network in general, I think will go a long way towards ensuring your success. Just having people with shared experiences that you can speak with, having mentors. Having mentors has long been shown that it's correlated with an entrepreneur's success. Having someone who can pave the way for you, who can flag pitfalls for you to avoid, et cetera. So I think, picking a network is step one, and how to make sure that it's the best network. Just understanding what that network has to offer and making sure that it's things that will add value to you and your business.
I think this is the same thing that applies to the network too, right? So that, ask the peers. Ask peer about, the VC and also that, maybe network. Rosaline-san or Dasira-san, do you have like another opinion about that? Or like, do you recommend some, if you have, the network you recommend?
So one thing that I actually recommend is beyond mentors, I actually recommend founders to have coaches to hold you accountable. I mean, it's not as common a practice, I feel, in Asia now, but in the States, it's very common where you think of yourself. I mean, I'm such a geek of high performance because I see founders, right? Look at Rosaline, right? Her willingness to go to her savings and then put her personal life on the line by like taking the key from her husband and then being, this is such a unique personality. You have such a unique personality of high performance, right? You're obsessed with trying to solve this problem. And I think to be able to get to that best level of performance, having a coach who's focused on, okay, asking you the right questions. This coach doesn't have to have all the answers, but asking you the right questions to get you to your next challenge in a good timeline that you set for yourself. I think it's a very good practice. So I would encourage people to think about that. And mentors and advisors, I think, beyond just your personal company, think about your personal board of advisors as well, right? So you're thinking a few steps ahead. I think in everything in life, it's a strategy. So think about who are the right people, because at the end of the day, to answer the question on what does an investor look for, it's are you the best person or the best team to solve this problem at this right time, right? And what gets you to that point? So you want to surround yourself with the right people who will get you to that point, i.e. someone who has done this before. I see a lot of, I love operators that become investors because they bring a lot to the table. There's also a different perspective that they bring, having done it in a different environment, so they can speak to that. So just being mindful about, what challenge are you tackling? Who's the right person that will bring you to the next level? I think that's how you would decide, if this is the right network for me.
My favorite coach is a 3-time entrepreneur. He returned to Asia, but every time I hit these massive speed bumps, I would go to him and we talk. And usually I start with, "You were right." You were right. I did reach this point and I should have listened sooner, right? But sometimes there are very, very hard decisions to make. And maybe your revenue generators are your more toxic people, but what do you do, right? So what do you do? So yeah, no, it's so important to have a mentor coach, someone who's been on that same path before and understands exactly what you're going through.
And to Rosaline's point, sometimes you have to make the mistakes yourself, right? Sometimes you won't take anyone's word or advice. You kind of just have to go through it yourself to believe it. It's one of the reasons why, and Rosaline is a great example. Often some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we've backed are second and third time founders. Because by that time they've made all the mistakes, and they know
not all. You can continue making mistakes.
Oh, 100%, 100%. But some of the best ones will learn from those mistakes and hopefully, not make that level of mistake again. You might make other mistakes down the road, but anyway, it's a great point.
One of my biggest learnings as a founder is that you have to learn to listen. Always learn to listen, because there are so many blind spots and you can't see everything. And sometimes perception's reality. So it's the most humbling experience to be an entrepreneur, right? Because you know your limits, right? So I find that as time goes on, and I'm turning 60 this year, I'm more humble and I listen more, right? Because I started so late this time. So, but we're more determined, right? But if you listen, then you actually figure out the markets, your team, your stakeholders, the clients, right? But listening is the most important trait for an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Sarah-san and Rosaline, that I think you're already out there. So, you already have a, right network and then right people to ask, and who is right and who is wrong. But, looking back when you're very young and then started, the business, like when you don't know anything, that what was actually that, how can I say, so finding the first right network or right, mentor is actually important. But, what was actually that, I don't know, this is maybe a difficult question, but, what was kind of like click moment? Like, when you find the right person or what in the network, like, what's the, kind of like just, how can I say, judge point or that, because, if you don't know what's right, you cannot judge what's wrong neither, right? So that, what's actually, how do you do that, right sense? Because, I think there is some listeners very like in early stage, so that, they don't know what to do and who's right. And some of the actually, my friend actually raised, the created company and then find, luckily he found that, angel investor, but he said, oh, I'm gonna, invest like, like like $250,000. So, give me like 90% of share. And then he was like, is it right or not? And then he was like, no, this isn't right. This isn't right. But, he has so much network and seems to be a nice guy. So that, he wasn't sure that, this mentor is like, right person or not. So that, like how to kind of, start to building the right network or the right VC, or, is that, like, maybe, I don't know, could you share your own story that, when you actually started?
So this time around, I wasn't sure I was going to build my own startup. I was actually asked to join a bunch of boards. And, because you're at that age, 50-year-olds, they just join boards. but while I was trying to decide what to do, I met a VC and he said, I will back you. And that's when you think, oh my God, someone will back me. It's not just me and my husband backing me, someone else will back me. And so it puts you on this path. But of course, he tried to take 90% of the company. So that sounded like my story. And it wasn't until I was asking around a lot, like, is this normal? You sound like it was my story. And then I would ask, what's pre-money? What's post-money? What is this guy talking about? Because you don't know. So, I mean, thank goodness for Google, right?
Yeah,
true.
Yeah. So it's really just doing your research. Because you're ignorant of your ignorance, right? When you first start, you really do not know anything, right? So what is valuation? So it's just asking a lot of questions till but when something resonates, right? When someone's on the same wavelength because they get you. And when someone's being helpful and not just being a vulture and taking advantage of you, or hopefully and don't fall into those traps, because there are a lot of people like that. So my life is hard knocks and trial and error. And sometimes that's how you learn, right? You learn not to make the same mistakes again and again and again.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, this is the best time actually to be an entrepreneur, because you have so much resource online. Your friend, make Google your friend, and of course, do your verification. There's also too much online these days. But guess what? You're not alone. You're not the only founder in this world. Lean on different resources, and global networks like Endeavor is one. But there's so many others. There are a lot of forums. Take that extra mile. I think, it's good thing to make mistakes. And we talked about this a lot, like a mistake is a very bad thing, but it's really not. Try to make your mistakes early and not as costly, I think, would be the tip. But if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing right. So I always say to my team, let's make better mistakes tomorrow. We learn, because you learn by doing. You also don't want to get to a stage of paralysis of not making a decision. But the school of hard knocks, there's a lot of there's a lot of good that comes of that. It's painful, but as Rosaline has proven, I think there's great value to that as well. It's about, I'm Hakka, so there's this Chinese saying of tasting the salt. You need to taste a lot of salt, and that helps you, right? And you learn, you can tell straight away, actually, over time, you can tell, thinking about alignment of mission, of values, those are questions you want to answer, right? Is this person going to be aligned? And I always, maybe I'm also weird, but I like to play out situations, because I've had partnerships that fall apart before. And what I've learned from that is I didn't think about the hardest, things are, when you're dating and it's rosy, things are good, right? But you want to think to yourself, you want to ask yourself, when things get rough, when it gets really hard, how will this person react? And you will see it in different ways, right? Will this person be, with a huge temper and not be able to handle the stress? Because you're gonna, guess what? Entrepreneurship is a long run. You will be under tremendous stress, and you want to have a partner that's able to be with you through it all. So play those situations out, I would say, and think about that.
And also, as an investor, it's easy to support an entrepreneur in a company when things are going really well. Everyone's going to support you. I'm sure Rosaline can attest. But when things get difficult, it's the investors who still stay by your side and support you through those rough patches, I think, that are really worthwhile and worth their weight.
Thank you. Yeah, and so, that, Endeavor is helping that scale up stage entrepreneur, right? And then yeah, of course, at the beginning, you need network and then you need to have person to ask. But, I realized that, when you actually became a, CEO of the scale up, stage company, you do really need your peer. Because sometimes your co-founder or your husband can be that enemy, so that you cannot talk with people. So to have a peer outside of your company is like so important for you and your team to be successful. So thank you for that the comment. And so we have 23 minutes left, and the question I got already is kind of similar with like we already talked about. So and also we have very specific one, but maybe we can actually ask that question later. So if if there's a question from the audience, maybe we can actually take that question and answer. So
maybe, you want us to randomly pick one?
Well, maybe the audience maybe can ask that, question, so that we'll pick that, that question from that. Chelsea, could you, is there any question or, if people have a question, please actually write in the chat box so that we can actually pick the question and answer.
Yeah, we have actually Ryoko. Okay. Let me just filter through the questions. Okay. This is a really interesting question. So in terms of, we talked about sources earlier, right? So how about fundraising from accelerator programs? Is it usually too optimistic by the investor preying on young startups? So that's from Robin Fo.
Sarah-san, you may have, it sounds like you have opinions.
I always have opinions, but I'm going to let Jackie go first, actually, because technically, isn't Endeavor an accelerator as well? Like you have accelerator programs, right? So I think you can better comment from what you've seen.
Sure. So I actually wouldn't consider Endeavor an accelerator. I typically think of accelerators as trading capital for kind of the advice and the programming, whereas Endeavor,
so like the YC kind of model versus
exactly. Whereas Endeavor is very much a network that's giving access to mentorship, advice, programming, etc., but not in a quid pro quo way. And we're viewing the investment as kind of an added service that we're providing the entrepreneurs who kind of are eligible for Endeavor Catalyst, which is our co-investment bank.
And they have a choice in that. That's the difference, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think, Endeavor is a bit different, but I think, again, it goes back to the framing earlier. What are you getting in return? If the accelerator is providing a lot of value that's critical to you at that stage of your business and your growth, and you're getting a lot of learnings from it, to Rosaline, if you're going to be doing a lot of listening and learning and it can potentially prevent you from making some costly mistakes, to Sarah's point, then 100% it might be worth it. And taking that capital at that point in time might be kind of exactly what you need or not. But it's a very personal decision. And again, you have to evaluate the partnership and kind of what you're getting in return for the percentage of your company that you're willing to kind of give away.
Yeah, so I'll just add that, some believe that accelerator money is the most expensive, right? Because if you look at even 500 YC, it's what's that going to be 6% for 150K, 250K, depending. But again, it depends where you are, right? How desperate, I hate to put it that way, are you? What, what will this do for you? I mean, there's a lot of YC is being hit a little bit now, with recent things that has happened to it, but it's a good brand, right? It's a lot of investors are still waiting for the list of companies that come out from YC, for example, because it's some stamp of approval. So if it helps, think about those things, right? My favorite is always where you have an accelerator program where it's a non-dilutive grant. So prize competitions are great when you're starting out to get you going, actually, without giving too much away. But again, it's what are you willing to give? What's a quid pro quo that makes sense for you? So I wouldn't say it's a bad thing completely, but many believe it is a very expensive form of capital. If you have different options, great. If you don't, if you're willing to get that stamp of approval for something else at this stage, then sure, so and also to the point of gender equality, unfortunately, IFC did a study 2 years ago and found that, and you would appreciate this actually, Jackie, that after going through the accelerator program, which is supposed to equalize the environment, female founders actually were still raising less than the male founders, even after going through the accelerator program. So is it really all great? I don't know. More to be seen.
Interesting.
True. That, I think, that actually comment actually made me like, that reminded, I mean, actually, like before the, raising more fund, the higher, valuation was like, always good thing. But, in Europe or maybe sometime in Japan too, that, the thing a little bit changing. I think it's, happening in the States too, that, now that, like, what is smart, I forgot the term, the lean fundraising or that, the efficient funding is kind of getting in, kind of like in the trend too. Like, do you have any comment on that? Or I don't know. I think.
Sorry, could you repeat your last term? What term were you saying?
Like lean funding or the efficient funding.
Lean
So,
funding.
Yeah, so like not, before, raise more fund was kind of always a good thing. But in these days, we kind of start to say that, maybe you don't have to raise that much fund and you should like,
Yeah, I always think that valuation is not always the best metric. It's always what's publicized on TechCrunch, right? That you have a high valuation and that's great. But a lot of high valued companies are not making profits, and that's not a good thing in my opinion. How long will you wait to get to a stage of profitability and growth? It's a big question. So I think there has always been a maturity of thought where people look beyond the valuation. I just think that the market hype in the last couple of years, because, venture capital has, despite the pandemic, we've had really record numbers. So there's a lot of, I guess, immature players that are creating this illusion that valuation is everything that we're chasing for. But I don't think, and I'm sure Jackie can speak to this, but more mature investors have always looked to, okay, let's talk about the fundamentals. Where are you going? It's not just about the valuation, because things can change rapidly, right?
Yeah, and I'll add that, venture capital goes through cycles of rounds getting bigger and then smaller, and capital being more available and less available. So I think if you just stick to this idea and this principle of good dilution, again, what you're willing to give away at each step of the way, and where you want to end up in terms of ownership at the end of it all, I think you won't misstep. And kind of despite these trends, quote unquote, in venture capital. And to Sarah's point, and to Ryoko, your earlier point, it is really easy to be kind of swayed or enamored by the big valuation, but it can actually really hinder your company and your growth. It's not always a good thing, because you want to kind of keep showing forward progress and growth. And so anyway.
Yeah, so so this is maybe just my personal opinion, but I kind of heard that the female founder raised less compared to the male founder, even if they have same the business or the same market, but then first I was kind of feel sad, but now that I think that maybe raising this fund isn't maybe the problem, that that's kind of I start to think. So because as Sarah-san said that high valuation is not always a good thing. Having the stable a good business is actually most important. So yeah, thank you. So Chelsea-san, could you actually pick that as a question? We have 15 minutes left. So
okay. We actually have, okay. Is being a sole founder a barrier to fundraise?
Oh, I like this one.
So
I'll start and then.
Oh yes, Sarah, why don't you go ahead?
I was going to point to Rosaline. Rosaline's a great example. But just very quickly, I mean, I would say my parting thought is better, and talking about partnerships, it's better to be a solo founder than have a bad co-founder. So I would say that I mean, I personally have seen both sides of the coin. Some investors, like even Ryoko san mentioned it, I like to have that comfort of that team. But using the example of Twitter again, if you read that book, oh Lord, it created so much confusion because they were fighting for power, and then no one knew who to listen to. Somebody else was saying something. So you want to have a strong co-founder team that's working together if you're not a solo founder. But I think, a lot of solo founders have proven it. You look at Whitney Wolf Hurt recently, Bumble, who else? Sarah Blakely, eBay, Pierre Media, so many good solo founders. So I think it's not a barrier. I just think it really depends on what you bring to the table. Again, to answer the question, are you the right person, the right team to solve this problem at this time? Is what I would say. And Rosaline is a great example. So I was going to point to that.
So it hasn't been a problem fundraising. Where we have problems as a sole founder is I wish I kept up my engineering, right? So I was an engineer in undergrad, right? But we had punch cards, so it doesn't apply anymore what I learned. So I wish I had a co-founder who was the CTO, right? If I couldn't have been that myself, because I'm a veteran of the industry, so I know everything about business, but if the industry doesn't have tech and you're bringing it in, so I wish I either kept up my engineering or had a co-founder that was a great CTO, right? So that's been our stumbling block forever, right? Just getting the tech right. And in an industry where there is no tech and you're bringing it in, how many times do you build this platform and functionality? So I would recommend anyone that's a business person as a sole founder that you have to find someone that is so good in tech to help you in this journey.
Can I add a comment? I wasn't a professional engineer, but I studied engineering, so that all of my friends is engineers. So I kind of have a question from the engineering perspective. We are not good with people, so that especially
that's
that
okay. As long as you're good with tech, you don't have to deal. I just need an engineer that's great with tech, not with people. So so I can manage the people.
Okay, so the question is like like should we be that CTO or not, or can we just be that employee or something, because bringing them as a like C level is that sometimes because it's a marriage, and then like that can kind of like create the how can I say stress in your organization too, so that kind of like engineer is like a double-edged sword, because I kind of I feel sorry for my team because they have to deal with me. So, but do you have any opinion about that?
I mean, I'll add that echoing everyone's points. I think if and when you bring on a co-founder, continuing this metaphor that has permeated the entire conversation, it is a marriage. It can, having just like a good, strong partnership can really kind of propel your team forward and your company forward, or it can be incredibly destructive, as Sarah mentioned in the book that she was reading. But if you find someone who has, is very aligned to your mission, the problem you're trying to solve, that has, complementary skill sets, that kind of sounds like a dream come true. And I think that's Rosaline's point. And I think it's very different, being a co-founder to being an employee, because you're completely aligned. Your incentives are aligned. You want what's best. And I think that the other kind of interesting aspect of having a co-founder is, from what I've seen and observed, being an entrepreneur can be an incredibly lonely journey. As much as there have been many entrepreneurs before you, when you're going through it, it can feel incredibly difficult and isolating at times. And I would imagine that having a co-founder to share this experience with would be kind of a positive thing, as long as, again, your mission aligned, complementary skill sets, and you've hashed out the equity ownership piece ahead of time.
Thank you. So we have 9 minutes left, so maybe this might be the last question. Chelsea-san, could you pick one question?
Sure.
So we have an interesting question from Maita from the Philippines. So especially for Jackie and Sarah, since you see investments with a global lens, are there any nuances in raising from or amongst the APAC region that the founders should be aware of? So this is more APAC specific.
Interesting. So I'll jump to that in the way you would build versus the way you would raise. I actually spoke to Munib Mir from Baikia recently on my podcast, and he was, we're speaking about super app and sort of the concept of how, you look at Meituan and all these things. I actually think it's a very exciting time to be an APAC founder because you can learn from China, and there's so much growth that's happening, and it's such an exciting time that don't feel like you have to keep looking from the West. I think we've had that era of rocket internet, right, where a bunch of guys basically cut, copy, paste all the models, made it Zalora, Lazada, blah blah blah, and we felt like, okay, this is the best it can be. But look at what's happening right now with Grab, with all these great success stories of how we're bringing the concept of a super app. I mean, even Uber now, I looked at it recently, the way the interface has changed feels very Asia to me. And I think this is a great way to think about your possibility. And I think building an APAC, there's a lot of people say Southeast Asia is like one market, but I really laugh because it's so fragmented. And I'm sure Rosaline would speak to this as well, where you need to think about the markets that you're serving and really be very mindful about how you build and what it can be, right? So instead of just focusing on, let's say, Malaysia, which has a certain population, think about Malaysia and Indonesia and scale, with the language is sort of similar. There's differences there, but how can you think bigger? How can you build such that it's an attractive investment and raise from that point of view? So you don't want to limit yourself. And I think this is a great time to be an APAC founder. And when you're thinking about strategically raising, right, think about the bigger game. You look at Ankiti Bose Zilingo, right? She moved from India to Singapore. She has her team in a cheaper place in Bangkok because she's also bringing the shops that are from Chatuchak Market online, and it's benefiting from the cost opportunities there. So I think my advice would be in building strategically. There's so much in our back pocket in terms of the region that you can really have a huge opportunity, and how you sell that to your funders could be really interesting. It's very different from how I see founders raising in the United States. So I think be very mindful about that. Think bigger. Think about your opportunity here. How can you, save costs, build from the arbitrage of the mishmash of Southeast Asia and APAC, and really think about how you can grow, right? I think it's venture capital is looking for a lot of great ideas right now in Southeast Asia. It's not as saturated, I think. We'll see a lot of consolidation where it's similar models, but think about your unique play here so that you're unique. Think about the data play. There are a lot of places where we're not as mature yet, and there's a lot of opportunity, regulation. Think about that. So a lot of nuances, but I'm super optimistic and I'm super excited for what this presents for all of you in APAC.
And I'll add, back when we were talking about, what are investors looking for? We said great team, solving a real problem in a big market. And, APAC is a big market, and you want to be solving a real problem and understanding the local context. Don't try to solve a US problem in APAC because it might not be a problem in APAC, or a problem in APAC might not be a problem in the US. And so, understanding that local context and using that to your advantage, I think is so important, and making sure that investors understand that too.
Thank you. Rosaline-san, please share your thought.
Our fastest growing market is China, because what we found in China typically is a few years ahead of everywhere else. So we took a lot of what we learned in China, where we saw a convergence of insurance and healthcare and financial services already happening elsewhere. And so there is a convergence of business models that are coming out because they're so far ahead. So I do view every single market in Asia as unique, but if you could build a platform where you can plug and play in different markets, right? Knowing what's configurable and what is fixed, right? And what can you actually do to minimally localize, right? it gives you the ability to go global, right? So to me, being in Asia is such a plus because I think we see everything first. And it could apply. And I'm in the healthcare and insurance market. And this is a major pain point in every single country. So there are things we're seeing that we think can go global. So I think it's great to be in Asia right now and right here and to be an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think, I'm talking with, some of the, the investor or the, company and global company, and then we just talk about, like if you want to invest into something, like Asia is the right place because, like it's just the question is when, right? Asia gonna grow for sure. So that, also like if you are investing at, this stage, you can be the one who would, change the world. So yeah, thank you for that, those comment. And I think we have 3 minutes left, but still, I wanted to hear that, one word from the each, speaker today, because, we have an amazing speaker today. So could you, Sarah-san, start with maybe we have just 1 minute each, but, could you share that, last, one word from today's session? Sarah-san, could you?
Last word. I think play it for the long term, like Rosaline said, it's not all the glitz and glamour, but if you're in it for the right reason, if you're in it to solve a hard problem that you're obsessed by, stick at it, right? Because our world really genuinely benefits by the power of entrepreneurs. And I so believe in that, but be in it for the right reason and take care of your mental health. I think that's super important. We don't talk about that enough, but it's hard, right? So it's, and having a co-founder, the other thing I was going to say is it can make it more fun because you're both in it together in the rough, but don't neglect your mental health, because if it's a marathon, you don't want to run yourself dry in the first sprint. So keep going and keep hustling, and we all believe in you.
Thank you. Rosaline-san, please.
So entrepreneurship is hard. There's no denying that. But if you have an idea, right, and you think you can build something, don't be afraid to try. And I've lived a life where it's actually okay to fail, because as long as you learn how to get back up, right, you grow. And being an entrepreneur, and I've been back and forth, I've learned so much from being an entrepreneur versus being, a corporate climber, and I've done both. So it's like you're compressing time and you're accelerating learning. So I would, no matter how painful it is, I'm a better person for having been an entrepreneur, and I've learned a lot. And I'm still going. It doesn't matter. I thought it would stop at 60, but no, I think I'm going to stop at 70. I'll be the oldest entrepreneur.
Love it.
Thank you. So, Jackie-san.
Well, Rosaline, you're truly inspiring. It really is so incredible that you're still going and choosing this path, and just wish you all the success, continued success in the world. And just echoing what Sarah said, if you have an idea, try it. Rosaline said the same thing. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Make sure that you listen along the way. I think it's, easy to become a little bit like tunnel vision and think that you do have all the answers and that only you know what's right for your business. But remember that other people have been there before, have made the mistakes. So sometimes it's worth pausing, taking a step back and listening, and know that there are plenty of networks out there looking to support entrepreneurs, and many funds out there looking to increase their investments in female-led companies. And so congratulations to you all. Being an entrepreneur is truly, it's truly a hard job. It's not glamorous, but you're solving the world's problems and making the world better as a result. And so cheering you on.
Thank you. So thank you for everybody. That's all session today. And next Endeavor Hub is EndeavHER is happening sometime in the third quarter. So Chelsea-san, could you share that? How are we gonna share that? News and like maybe the question, and please.
All right. First off, thank you to our panel. Thank you, Rosaline, Sarah, Jackie, and Ryoko. Really, really good conversation. We have so many questions, and we're very sorry we can't answer all, but no worry. First, we will post this recording on our channels, and of course, we'll have more Endeavor sessions, like Ryoko said. So we have one every quarter, actually. So just stay tuned for announcements. And of course, how can you reach us? So we'll just have something flash on screen regarding how to contact us. So get connected with us. We're very interested in high scale entrepreneurship, and of course,